ultimately, I play a really fun game with these kids, and I encourage all parents listening to sit down around the dinner table. Ask your teenagers, if I gave you $1 million cash, if they're not smiling, then it's $2 million until they smile. Okay, let's get real. Some of them are like, million's nothing. I want 5 million, like they're like, I want to be like so-and-so. But I usually say $1 million cash. If you don't spend it in 24 hours, you have to give it all back to me. What would you do with it? You get a really good idea. Do they have any concept of money?
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today, we're joined by Shellee Howard. Shellee, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, let's start off by asking the question that we ask every guest who joins us on the show. Who is Shellee Howard?
Wow. Start off with the hard question. No, I'm just joshing. Well, I think first and foremost, I am a mother of 4, 2 biological, 2 step, and now I have 2 exchange students living with me, one from Germany and one from Italy. So I love teenagers, always have. It's just been my wheelhouse. Who am I professionally? I am the CEO and founder of College Ready. Our goal or our mission is to help 1 million families get into college and graduate debt-free. This all started when my son was in 8th grade. So, the fact that I am living what I'm talking about makes it I get very passionate about the topic. And so I'm excited to share with you and your audience any which way you want to go.
Yeah, looking forward to it because as we were talking prior to, our oldest being 12, I feel like in a blink of an eye, we're going to be there, right? So for us personally, I think the earlier you talk about this, the better, right? Just the financial aspect and just preparing as well.
And I tell parents when they're young, such as 12, it's really about making college different than school. They're not looking forward to more school. Most of them are quite done with school by the time they finish high school. So the trick or the idea is to take them on college tours and show them how different it is, how different an experience. They pick the day, they pick what they want to study, and you make it exciting and something to look forward to. So when they're fighting for those A's and B's, it is something that they can get close to really embrace. And it does happen super fast. We start working with students when they promote from 8th grade. So college starts looking at what students accomplish when they promote from 8th grade. Many parents call me thinking they're very early in the junior year. And in all reality, that is on the late side. So it's not too late, but it's getting close to get a full ride for sure. And even a partial ride is difficult in that time span.
Wow. And I know here in Canada, in high school, to be honest, actually, I don't know if it's changed, but from the last time, and when we were in high school, it was either academic or applied. That's what it was going to on our way out of high school. Right. And you pretty much need to know what you want to do going into high school, what you're capable also of doing by the end of grade 8. Right. So it's oh, geez, sometimes you think that's sort of early. I mean, obviously, kids can go back and forth, but you need to know if you're going academic or to the applied part of it.
Absolutely. And my international students, they have to decide so early. In Italy, I mean, they know, just like you said, just like Canada, you need to decide, are you going STEM? Are you going the arts? Are you going, hands-on technical? In the US, we have a bit more time. Usually we don't have to pick until the end of high school. And so helping students get really clear about their gifts and talents and their core values is really the best thing you can do as a parent. And that is what we start our focus on. college ready is more than just getting into college. It's about launching. It's about what happens after they leave home. And is that college? Is that a trade school? Are they ready for college? Some will take a gap year. Some will, defer. It all depends on the student and their maturity and their ability. And so it's a custom plan, completely custom is how we do it with our students.
Now, your eldest son graduated from Harvard. Can you kind of take us through that journey?
Sure, absolutely. So without going through the weeds and, the long story, it all started, honestly, he came home from middle school in spring. I'll never forget it. And he was so excited. He's like, Mom, I know exactly what I want to do when I grow up. I know exactly what college. So excited. And I'm like, oh, wonderful. I changed my major 5 times. I did it all wrong. Help me. And he says, yeah, so I want to be a brain surgeon. I want to go to a top tier school. And I took a really deep breath. And I turned around and I was like, oh my goodness, I have no idea how I'm going to help him because I was the first to go to college. So he seriously jumped from the first generation college student to a Ivy League pre-med track. Right. And honestly, I started seeking advice and wisdom and there was nothing. And this was in 2008. And I just had a really tough time finding anybody who could help me. So I remember going to his high school counselor and saying to him, you tell her what you told me because I don't want to be that parent. Like this is your thing. And he said, very matter of fact, I want to go to a top tier school and I want to be a brain surgeon. And she said, why would you waste your time or money doing that? They don't make much money anymore. And that's the look I gave her, was like, did you say that out loud to a child? Can you predict the future, right? And so he's like, now what, Mom? So more pressure on Mom. And so I went back to school. I went to UC San Diego and I got my certification and I started touring colleges, 25 a semester. This is my 13th application season now. And he was my guinea pig. So back to the Harvard story. He was my firstborn. You know what that's like, right? Mm-hmm. Those are the ones that you pick up the dirty pacifier and get a new clean one. And, you don't feed him sugar and then it gets easier and easier. But he did what I suggested. And what I did is I reverse engineered it. I followed the path of those before him and I worked backwards. So if this was the path that those students who got admitted to Ivies were doing, where did it start? And so I just worked backwards and figured it out. And then I was a professional interviewer for Procter & Gamble for many years. So I learned a lot about psychology and how the mind works. And so I just kind of laid the path before him. He did the hard work. He owns that. He earned it on his own. I just kind of laid the process and procedures. And he followed them. And when he graduated high school, I'll never forget, I was not a college consultant at that time. And I was sitting in the front row listening to him give the salutatorian speech. And a young man said, dude, to me. I didn't even know that kid was smart. And he was talking about my son. And I'm like, that to me was genius because he was a normal kid doing normal things to everybody else except to me. And he had 7 top tier school offers. And
wow.
Yeah, Harvard just absolutely was the perfect fit for him. I remember him calling home on the first week and saying, Mom, there's 12 kids in my English class and one of us will get an A. That's not me. And, it was the first time he got a B, but he was okay with it because he was among his people. Mm-hmm. And so I tell people it's not a perfect fit for every student. My second child was like, please don't make me go there. And, she had a different path and that's okay. And that's what we're trying to help students figure out is, what is your path? Where do you belong? Where's your strengths, your opportunities? And how do we get you to where you want to go ultimately? For my son, it definitely was the perfect fit. And to other students in our program, the Ivies are a great fit. but they have to be ready to be amongst the best of the best
Mhm.
and fight for it. And not every student is cut out. I know I wasn't. Like what my son accomplished. Whoa. Yeah. Now he's an orthopedic surgeon resident and he loves every single second of it. So it is a path and a strategy. And, he earned it. It's nothing I can take away from him. I just kind of laid it out what he needed to do.
Mhm. And it's so interesting, obviously as young people, you have stuff in mind. And I'm just thinking, for a child to tell their parent that, and then the first thing their parent is thinking and like, oh gosh, how are we going to pay this? Right? Like, oh yeah, all these years you can do and be everything you want to do, but we didn't save enough for that, or we didn't put money aside, or we don't have a plan. So I think where I want to go next is to share with us parents on, for our role and our job in regards to like helping our kids launch and get out there to whatever college or university it is that they want to go. What suggestions do you have for us?
So this is the first thing as parents I suggest, and it usually happens right around 5th grade where parents are kind of like, whoa, this is moving quick. At that point, you get a choice. Do you want to focus on the best academic fit, the best social fit, or the best financial fit? As parents, we want to give our kids all of it. Let's get real. Like we want, yes, please, I want all of that. But you also have to be realistic. What can your student do and what can you afford? So we help families in 2 ways. We help the student be the best they can be. We help the family lower their expected family contribution by knowing what the FAFSA looks at, what it doesn't look at, how to complete the CSS profile, how to complete the FAFSA, and put their financial house in order. Most people don't realize that the FAFSA looks at the second semester of the sophomore year and the first semester of the junior year. So if you think about it that way, for somebody who's just starting to plan for college their junior year, they're already financially way behind to get a financial full ride. And they're like, well, why didn't anybody tell us this? That's my mission, is to just let people know. If I could just give your listeners one piece of advice, get your financial house in order by that time. Most people wait and then say, oh, if they get in, I'll figure it out. That's like purchasing a home and figuring out how you're going to pay for it.
Right.
That's the same cost, right? For a lot of, not internationally, but for a lot of people, especially if they want to come in the US, it is the cost of a home in most places.
Yep.
And to figure it out, or the other one that's scary is they say, well, you know what? They need to prove they're old enough to go off to college. We're going to let them figure this out. And I'm like, no, would you allow your child to even go buy their own car? That's scary enough, right? Would you allow them to go buy you a home without you being involved? No. So why would you put this in the hands of a 16 or 17-year-old to figure this out? Scares me to death. So it's really that.
Yeah. And the prices, I mean, in Canada, the prices are astronomical, but the United States is definitely next level. Our oldest, like 2 years ago, he was like all gung-ho about going to UCLA when he was older. I'm glad that conversation stopped, because I was like, oh my goodness, for one, I don't even know the process of, you being Canadian and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, wow, if you actually had to pay that price, oh my word, like it's just
well,
nuts.
in his case, it's a little different though. It was less of an academic decision. He just liked the idea of going to UCLA.
He wants to play basketball.
And to be honest, that is a lot of students. How they pick a school is they pick the football team or the basketball team or the, whatever the sport or the music, and that's the other scary part, right? They're making a decision based on the emotions of. My daughter said, Mom, I really want to go to the University of Alabama. And I'm like, honey, we're from Southern California. What draws you to the South? And she says, duh, Mom, the football. And I'm like, oh, so you're going to go play football? And she's like, no. So even a child of a consultant, I live this world. She's drawn to the football hype and the big sorority and all of that. And I said, honey, but ultimately they don't have your major.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's not the best fit school. So those are the conversations I get to have with these young adults is how do you pick your best fit school? And if they don't know, if their parents not doing it or their neighbors not doing it, how else do they find out? And that is how we guide the students is we help to figure out what are their gifts and their talents, what are their things that they hope to achieve. Do they even care about money? Do they want to live at home? Like there's all of these factors that nobody wants to talk about. And I talk about them. And these students, they're very clear when somebody says, so, what matters to you? They're big time advocates. I don't know about your oldest, but if I ask students here and I say, anything about global warming, we have a lot of opinions, right? If we can just lock into what their opinions are, but they don't know why. If I dig deeper, they're not sure why, but they know it's an important cause. So we're having some deep conversations that really their high schools are not having. And if it's not something you talk around the table, they're kind of left to figure it out.
So that in terms of, obviously, based on what you've said, you got to start probably earlier than most of us would think. But other than getting really good grades, what else can young people be doing to really position themselves to get accepted into the programs and the schools that they want to go to?
That's such an important question because it changes all the time. So maybe what worked for you as adults, as parents, it no longer works anymore. What worked for my son in 2012, completely different strategy now. So it's important that the families understand it's not like it used to be. I give the example, I applied to 2 schools. I was going to go and snow ski in Colorado, or I was going to surf in San Diego. That was my big college planning, right? If that was the case now, you would be at a community college. It just doesn't allow for that. And if that's part of the strategy, great. But only 6% of community college students go on to get their 4-year degree now, where before it used to be a brilliant strategy back in the day. So in answer to your question, right now, the current state of where colleges are, they want somebody to stand out. So what does that mean, right? Well, somebody's always going to have a higher GPA or a higher test score than you. That's just how it is. This year in 2021, I had 3 students with a 5.0 GPA and a perfect 36 ACT. So for all of those parents listening out there who are going, yeah, my kid's got a 4.0, I'm so pumped. Just know it's now a 5.0. And you're like, whoa, didn't see that coming. Okay. So that's the first thing. It's getting your mindset, like what are these top tier students doing? And how do we set our student up? Because if they don't offer it at your high school, you need to supplement as a family. It could be community college. It could be dual enrollment. It could be, there's so many things. It could be an internship, a research project. So we're helping these young people figure out who they are, what matters to them, and then we're planning a standout strategy to go and achieve that and prove to colleges they know what they're good at and they know what they want to see changed in the world, and they're actually leading others to create change. That's what colleges are looking for. It's not a zillion activities. It's not just a GPA anymore, because it's just, kids are just overachievers. They're just competitive. And so it's really hard for a standout student. I talked to a mom this morning and she was all excited. My kid's a 4.3. I think he's going to Harvard. And I'm like, whoa, UCLA, you talked about, the average GPA last year was a 4.7.
Wow.
Yeah. So all these kids who are thinking 4.0, woo, yeah, not so much, unless they stand out. So colleges know what they're looking for, and it's more than just a GPA and a test score. It's passion, it's service, it's colleges want students to come and make a great environment at their school. They're not looking for just smart people to come and sit and take an education and leave.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're looking for, how do I compete? Remember, college is a business. They want you as much as you want them. I know it's hard to imagine that, but in order for them to be successful, they need to graduate the best of the best who puts that diploma on their wall. And now they are marketing for this next generation. And that is the key right there. You can't do what everybody else is doing. You know, tutoring is a great example. All smart kids tutor. They do. So, I mean, colleges aren't going to go, whoa, check this kid out. He tutored. But yet parents are like, oh, I'm so proud of Johnny. He tutored, you know, that's so cool. And it is, but that's not what it takes to get into the you know, higher echelon. And that's the challenges for people to understand. That is more the norm now than the unique.
Wow. So I guess, what are you talking, or what are your conversations looking like for students and parents who don't have that 4.0 and, you know, who aren't the strongest academically? Because that was almost sounded like a downer. I'm thinking if that was me, oh boy, I don't know. I wonder what I would be doing now. Right. So
totally. And that's where so we work with students from a 3.0 to a 5.0. Okay. We have everything in between, because in all reality, those top tier schools are not for every student.
Mm-hmm.
They would not be happy there. So what do we do with the 3.0 student? We need to have what I call the long game. What ultimately is important to them? Do they want to go into the Peace Corps? And do they want to work that path? Do they want to be an entrepreneur and start their own business? Do they want to, you know, go into sales? What does that look like? Because it's different than that student who is willing to fight for a 4.0 or a 5.0. And so our conversations are very different in a way, but not fully. We just take the competition part out and we truly focus on, what do you want? Ultimately, I play a really fun game with these kids, and I encourage all parents listening to sit down around the dinner table. Ask your teenagers, if I gave you $1 million cash, if they're not smiling, then it's $2 million until they smile. Okay, let's get real. Some of them are like, million's nothing. I want 5 million, you know, like they're like, I want to be like so-and-so. But I usually say $1 million cash. If you don't spend it in 24 hours, you have to give it all back to me. What would you do with it? You get a really good idea. Do they have any concept of money? I mean, I've had a student ask Siri, what would I do with $1 million cash? And you're like, oh no. And then I've had other students say, well, first I'd buy a fixer upper, and then I'd flip it. And then I'd buy 2 rental properties and I'd flip them. And you're like, is your dad in real estate investing? And you're like, oh, I see. And so it's really, you get a good core. Do they get life beyond at home? And so when I play this with my students, I find out what is important to them. Some students want to live right next to their parents, and some students can't get far enough away, right? Some want to live in a bigger house. Someone, they don't care. So we have to find out to them, and it changes, right? You have this conversation in 8th grade, then you have it again in 11th grade, and it's usually very different. So I help families understand, for that 3.0 student who is thinking, I don't know if this college thing is good for me. Okay, that's okay. But what else?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. I have students in my program, I go, if college is not for you, that is okay. But what else? Is it a trade school? Is it, you know, what is it? And we have to help them plan and strategize, because they don't know. I mean, imagine, take yourself back to being your child's age. I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't even know through college. I kept changing my major when I was inspired. I'm like, oh, psychology is cool. So that's how we help students, is we're not non-judgmental. In other words, as parents, they think we have expectations of what we want. I have students all the time who are in the arts and have been told by their parents, we're not paying for you to go to art school. And so what they hear is, they don't want me to be an artist. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, great, you want to be an artist? How much will you make? How long will it take to get there? Instead of just saying no, I let them figure it out. As soon as they start following an artist and they're like, oh my, they wait tables a long time, but I don't ever say no. And so I'm a very neutral person. So sometimes when it gets volatile, oh, you just don't want me to, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And then they figure out, whoa, like this is not going to work out with my, Porsche 911 that I got my eye on. So there's these kids, they're into fast. They want to know everything fast, and they want it now. They don't want to wait and see. And so I have to help them project into the future, because they're so used to getting things here and now that seems very odd to them. Like, what? I don't know. And they want to stop there. And I'm like, no. And then I talk about, do you ever want to move out of your parents' home? And 97% have said yes. And that's a good thing. I remind them that that's part of what we want. That's a natural progression. And then the others, I tell them that their parents should stop cooking and doing their laundry. And at some point they will want to move out. So it's all in fun. We try to decrease the overwhelm and the stress and the uncertainty, and just have some good conversation about, what do they want? What is important to them? And it's okay that they don't know. But if they don't start having those conversations, what are they going to do? Mm-hmm. That's the question.
So do you go through looking at how they would actually be able to afford and pay for this, I guess, for both the parents and the students?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a big one too, right?
Yeah. So we actually do it before they apply. So we don't want them to waste their time, money, or energy applying to a school that they choose not to afford. Mm-hmm. Remember, it's a choice to go into debt. And so I tell students, right, the goal is they have some dream schools, they have some comfort schools, and they have some safety schools. And at the end of the day, they want to lay out all of the financial offers and be able to make a wise decision, a good business decision. And we talk about this as we're talking about college. So it's just kind of normal for them to think about it, because most parents don't understand these kids cannot take a loan on their own. They have to have a cosigner, which means that they're actually the ones in debt. Right? And parents don't get that. They're just like, oh, it's their deal. Let them figure it out. And I'm like, woo, that's a big one. There's retirement, right? So if you don't want to retire, so I'm not anti-college. I'm not anti-paying for it. I'm just, let's plan for it. Let's talk about it. Let's have those conversations. I have families that are happy to write a check for full price. And I have families that cannot afford college at all. But there are 12 colleges that are tuition free. The student has to work. But I mean, that's kind of part of life, right? It's like, if you don't want to pay for it, you got to work for it. So I tell every student, even if your family can't afford it, there are colleges for free. Just because they don't know about them, nobody's like, the basketball team's probably not the best in, NCAA, right? But it's a free 4-year education, a degree that they will graduate debt free. If they want to be an entrepreneur, nobody's ever asked me where my degree is from. right? They just know I have a college degree. So I'm always proud to share. That's not a problem. But they have to think if a student wants to go into nursing, the hospitals look at their NCLEX score. They don't ask them, did you go to this school, or this school? So why would they go into massive debt if they're just looking at the end result? These are the conversations we're trying to help families understand. It's not college is expensive, don't go. It's, I want to go. I see the benefit of having the social, the education, that whole growing up time. But it's also part of the conversation of, is this the right decision for our family? And, it's hard conversation telling your kid, maybe it's not a good thing for us. It's very humbling, right? As a parent, I have 27, 23. So 2 are out of college. They did it debt free. So I'm like, yes. And then I have a freshman in college, and I have a high school senior. So like, I'm living this. I am truly having those hard conversations.
Wow. And so how did your 2 graduate debt free? What was their
standout strategy was pretty awesome.
Okay.
I approached it as if I was building the best business that I've ever built, and they did the hard work. So I laid it out based on and they were very different strategies. One of them had this dream and was this, and the other one was more social and wanted the experience. And so there's not one thing. That's what people are like, just give me that secret, just tell me. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But what I can tell your listeners is picking the right college for the right student is the key to a debt-free degree. Okay. Colleges have so much money. People forget endowments, alumni, all of that is feeding into the school. They have to give that money away, and it's not need-based because that's government stuff. It is truly, you earned this. So if a student applies to a school that they are the top candidate, they throw money at them, because just like an athlete, they're fighting for the best, the smartest, the next Nobel Peace Prize, person. And so it's all about picking the right colleges. In 2021, I had 61 seniors in our program. They earned over $10.7 million in scholarships, all earned, not need-based. There was so much money. If I could just tell you how much money there's out there, people just don't know how to get it, and therefore it must not exist. But I tell people, you could do your taxes and pay what you came up with, or you could pay somebody else to do your taxes and pay what they come up with. You know what I mean? It's they know stuff that we don't know. And that's what I have figured out in the last 12 years. That's the key, is picking the right student and the right university. And that is where the money comes from.
Oh, and I'm sure that's the same for in Canada too, right? Like,
oh yeah,
scholarships to be had and grants and all that.
Absolutely. I was just in Croatia doing some study abroad program over there, looking for students internationally. And it was amazing because when I talked to students who were local, they're like, I can't believe it. I had to pay $1,000 this year, and I had to pay for lunch. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me right now? So I am fully aware that in some places, this is not as much of a problem as other places, but these kids still want to get in the best school they can, even internationally, right? Oxford. I mean, there's just so many great international schools that it's not just a US problem. International students pay double what US students pay on most of the time.
Yeah, same here too.
Yeah,
that's okay.
That's a whole other thing.
I think our strategy now is we're just going to send our kids to college in Croatia.
We'll pay for the flight.
No, No doubt. It is really interesting when I talk to the dean of students, how open they are to people coming and studying there. The one thing you have to think about, and this is what I tell my international students going both ways, is do you want to stay there? Because to take a Croatian degree and come back and compete in the US or Canada and be absorbed by the big companies, the big, fortune companies, you're now competing with the Ivies and the best of, you know what I mean? So if you want to be an entrepreneur, you got a great degree for a very inexpensive, but if you want to be a CPA or law or medicine, don't go that route because it's really hard to come back and compete against that high level. So again, it's kind of knowing what the long game is and what the short game is, and kind of, having a plan A and a B and a COVID plan. I mean, that's a real thing we're helping these kids with. So luckily we've always had a plan C. It wasn't always called COVID, but now it is. And we help families get real. Do you want to pay $70,000 for an online education? Right? Some do, some don't. What's the backup plan is what we're talking about. And you can't just do nothing. I mean, that would cause probably a lot of mental illness. It would probably be a really hard year. So we are having those conversations and we're like, okay, if not this, then what? And we're just trying to keep them moving forward in a productive, mindful way.
Yeah. So have you seen students staying at home more over the last almost 2 years at this point, or still wanting to go in other states?
I think students still want to go. I think the parents don't want them to go. So that's what I've seen. I really haven't seen students saying, oh yeah, I want to stay home. Yeah, I don't. They still are very happy to go into this world and, go. The parents definitely are keeping their families closer. And I get it, right? I mean, that's our job. And so what I have seen is originally everybody who used to send from, I'm talking from East Coast to West Coast, West Coast to East Coast, because that's the extreme in the US, is we used to see a lot of the East Coast come out West and a lot of the West Coast go out East. And that all stopped when COVID happened. Okay. They started staying in their part of the world, but still going to amazing schools. That's what we saw, the big change. But I'm telling you, these kids still, they still want to get their 4 years done and move on. They don't want to postpone life. They really don't. They're like, if I have to go online, I go online, because who knows when this is going to end and how long am I going to be in college? And, so they are thinking of ways. And we do have, lots of different options. We could go community college to transfer to a 4-year. We can go a state school to a UC school. We can go a UC to an Ivy. So I tell these students, it's not forever. We can have different options as we're pivoting, but you need a plan, because if not everything's going to transfer, you're going to stay on the hamster wheel of, I'm never going to graduate and I've been, in college forever. Right. And that's not going to make anybody happy.
Now, I want to circle back to something that you mentioned earlier. I want to do a deeper dive into the tuition-free colleges and find a little bit more about that. So how does one enroll in that? What are some of the programs that are available, and what does that whole process look like? Obviously, you said you have to work, but let's do a deeper dive into that.
Absolutely. So I have a list of 12, and I don't have them off the top of my mind because I don't have a lot of students who want to work. I'm not lying, you guys. They would so much rather take debt than have to physically work. So in working, I'm talking about working in a bookstore, working in the library. I'm not talking manual labor,
man.
You know what I'm saying? So I don't have them top of mind because every time I bring them up, they're like, I'm not doing that. So I have them, and I'm happy to share them with any of your listeners if they want to reach out to me. It's not a secret. They're on Google. I mean, you can go out there and Google tuition-free colleges and you will see them. You have never heard of them before. They're not, NCAA Division I kind of thing. So I like to let people know realistic expectations. But if money is the reason why you think you can't go to college and you don't think you have what it takes to get an academic or an athletic scholarship, right? That mid-tier student, that's an option for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we're always working, can we get scholarships for visual and performing arts, for athletes, for, speech and debate? Like we're looking every place we can for scholarships. But if you have a student who's just not liking school or isn't good at school and just fighting through it, they're like, I'm not paying 4 years of this. This is what? No. And so it all comes down to, they just say, I can't afford it. And that breaks my heart because they just don't know that they can if they really want it.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. Yeah, I know. I was going to say it's interesting. I have no stats to back this up, but just between Canada and just, people I've seen, or even when I was in college and then university, people like students work. Like it's not, I don't think it's as, down here, like it's just a normal thing, right? Like you work your way through school.
I'd say it's a good mix. Like with my students, I teach part-time at a couple of colleges. I'd say it's maybe 50-50.
Okay.
Maybe less than half that actually do work. So like I had some students who worked full-time while they were in school, others who had part-time jobs, but there were some who were, their full-time job was school. They didn't do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I found that there's probably actually more of those.
My thing too is sometimes you see the students whose parents are paying the way, the effort maybe decreases. It's like that catch-22. And even just hearing the stories that Brian shares with me, I'm like, oh boy, you're wondering like, oh, this must be a kid whose parents are paying, right? So that's hard. It's like, what do you do? Like, what is best for your child? To just be like, hey, listen, the next 4 years are covered. And, as long as you finish, or, like, no, you got to put some money in on this just to more so own it. Right.
I always tell parents, I mean, if you're at all concerned, right, of them taking this very serious. I had a family who was concerned, and it was brilliant what they did. They said, if you go to college and we're going to take out loans, and if you get a degree, and they had like rules, like it had to be a B average, like they had, certain benchmarks. And then they said, we will pay off the loan. So they did hear you take this serious and you do your work and you put everything into it. And if the result is what we mapped out, we can afford to do this for you, but it is not a free ticket to fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is, I thought it was awesome. If I was going to do something, I like the mixture of having a little bit of skin in the game and it not be, hey, just go have a great time with your friends and, we'll take care of that. So I do tell families there's lots of different options, sometimes it makes sense right now to take a loan and let your money go in other areas and compound and build and then pay them off. And, there's lots of different strategies that you can use, but it's having a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the ticket that I'm trying to help people understand. The student needs a strategy and the family needs a financial strategy. So in the end, there's not debt.
Yeah, you kind of put it perfectly there. You can either come out of it with, if you go in with a good strategy, you're going to come up prepared for the rest of your life. Or conversely, you can come out with a lot of debt, not necessarily be ready, right? I think there is a fair amount of students who don't make the best use of the time. You come out of there without a network, you've just partied for 4 years, you have a piece of paper, but you have a lot of debt and you probably, you haven't positioned yourself properly.
And, the other part I think is very important to the student's success is picking a major that makes sense. There's nothing wrong with women's studies. I'm not here to diss it or anything. It could be a really cool minor, but what do you do with it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Psychology major is the #1 unemployed major of all majors because students are not told they have to go on to get a further degree.
Right.
So they get out, they look for a job and there's no psychology major job. They're like, sorry, mom and dad, there's no job. And they're like, whoa. Right? Because there's no job called that. So I tell families, have this discussion early of 3 potential careers. And what does that look like? And what is the strategy to get there? Because they want to be a teacher, great. Can they live on a teacher's salary? Do they want to go into debt? And how long will it take to pay that off? Those are the discussions I'm encouraging families to have, because that's a reality. Kids don't have a clue how much a house costs, let alone how much electricity is. So to ask them to pick a school is very scary.
So just in wrapping up, I have one last question. How long is it typically taking people to pay off their college debt?
Yeah, that is a really good question. Because I discourage college debt, I don't know the statistic. In my program, we have a strategy, and that is, if a family chooses, I had a family this past year who got into Harvard and Stanford, had to make the big decision. Harvard was free, Stanford was not. They chose Stanford. Okay. I'm like, I did my job. Like I gave you everything I could possibly give you, but they wanted the student to stay close to home because of COVID. You know what I mean? Like, so is that a bad thing? They could do it. Great. That's what I want families to get clear on is, do you want, what terrifies most people is, even if the student passes away before the parent, the parent must assume the student loan. Like, you can't bankrupt this. You're locked in. So I want parents to think, okay, retire, pay student loan. And I just, as long as they know what they're getting into and they have a plan to pay it off. And like for my son, he wanted to go to medical school, but he said, Mom, I am not going to medical school if I have an undergrad loan. I'm not going to go double deep. And then I'm going to marry somebody with that. I won't do it. So he knew that if he didn't get to go for free, that was his motivation, that he wouldn't have gone on to medical school, because there is no free medical school. It just, that's the loan you want, because that's going to pay off.
Right. Yeah.
But that's the strategy we had to talk about early on, because that was it. To him, he was like almost military, because he's like, I want to go to medical school, but I'm not willing to go into double debt. And so when you ask, I mean, I know lots of doctors who pay for their student loans for a very, very, very long time. But that was their choice, right? I don't know. I didn't have a student loan, so I don't know. I do know I get a lot of second children, because the first one, the parents are like, oh, we did it wrong. We took out a ton of loans and now we can't afford for number 2, number 3, number 4. Can you help us? And so I get a lot of that, because they didn't quite do it the best way and they don't want to make that mistake again. And so it's really thinking it all the way through. It's kind of like when you get married. Hopefully you don't just meet somebody and go, hey, let's just get married. And you need to think like the strategy here, right? It's like a marriage. You have to really understand what you're getting into before you just pick the name of a school.
If you do both improperly, you're still going to be paying for your student loan after you're done paying for your divorce.
Well said.
But no, I think the one thing out of everything that you said, the thing that's impressed me most is that you helped somebody prepare to the point where Harvard said, you can come here for free. And they said, no, thank you. That's pretty impressive.
It's crazy. I know. And I have students who go to state schools, and what they don't realize, in California, especially, our state schools are so overcrowded, you can't get out in 4 years. So now you're going to college 6 years for a 4-year degree. So now do the math, and people think, it's so much cheaper to do that. But when you figure that's 2 years without retirement, without a salary, you have to lay the whole picture out. I call it a puzzle. It's a bunch of puzzle pieces. Do the border first. and then fill in the middle.
Mhm.
Don't just put pieces, you'll lose a piece, and it's going to be that one piece to finish the puzzle. That's the point. So,
well, no, that's some great stuff. And now
Mhm.
we have 13 new options. There's 12 free tuition schools and Croatia. So
They probably don't take Canadians.
how, I don't know, Croatia was happy to have students. There was nobody they were turning away. And it's a beautiful place, by the way. And they're not paying me to advertise. But yeah, I mean, it was something that the university was beautiful. And I couldn't believe how they were able to offer that. It's just so crazy to me. And I was in Spain this year as well, looking at universities there, and it's so inexpensive there. It's just a totally different option.
Yeah.
So, I just want students to know when are they coming back? That's the big thing.
Mhm,
People are
mhm.
like, yeah, let's go get a free education. But again, now what?
Yeah.
my mind's blown. You have one student who's complaining about paying $1,000 and having to buy their lunch, a large group of students who don't want to work at the bookstore to go to school for free, and then one who's just saying, no, I don't want to go to Harvard, no thank you, even though it's not costing me anything. Yeah, my mind is blown. That was a great conversation.
It has been my pleasure. I love teenagers, and they're so real. What they say is just, this is how it is.
Yep.
They're my people. I love them dearly, but they tell me, they don't hold back. They're pretty amazing.
Well, just to wrapping up, share with us like where everybody can find you online, what you have going on, maybe going into 2022. We would love to hear.
Absolutely. So if somebody is interested, for your guests, I am going to offer a free discovery call with myself where they can ask questions. If they're Canadian, great. I get that system if they want to go either way. The easiest way to do that is to go on my website, which is www.collegereadyplan.com. So the company's College Ready, but the email is collegereadyplan.com, and click on strategy session, say they heard me on your podcast, and I will gift them a free discovery call. I have a best-selling book they can buy on Amazon, which is How to Send Your Student to College Without Losing Your Mind or Your Money. And that is a fun, easy book. And I'm on podcasts all the time. I actually just won an award I'll be receiving in Dubai coming up in February. And then College Ready won an award as a company in Las Vegas. So we're doing what we can. Our mission is to help families understand the importance of this conversation. And so any opportunity to speak to any other groups is always much appreciated, because I can get the word out so much faster this way.
Mhm.
Now, the question I have is, have you been on Dave Ramsey yet?
I actually have taken his course twice, Financial Peace University, and I haven't been part of his program. So no is the answer. There are some strategies that we do collide in a little bit. I do think at some point it does make sense to go into debt. My son, going to medical school, I'm okay with that debt. We've already done the numbers, and after 3 years, he'll be paid off. So I'm okay with that, right? That's investment. That's not silly stuff.
Right.
And so I'm not truly hard and fast one way or the other. It's just the conversation of when, what, how, why. That's what I'm trying to help people understand.
Yeah.
So it's not hard and fast rules in my world. It's what makes sense for your family.
For sure.
For sure. No, and there's a lot of alignment there too. But again, Shellee, thank you so much for the time. We greatly appreciate it.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.